first part would be the awareness funnel. Next portion I'd say would be consideration, buying side, even in fundraising or market condition. I'm now just selling to an investor to get them to buy into my vision to kind of join me for this. It's just, a different type of sale, bigger stakes, bigger money. It helped me to kind of figure out how to set up the go-to-market motion.
Quick message to highlight a GTM fund portfolio company that is crushing it. User evidence. 67% of sellers have watched a deal slip through their fingers because they couldn't provide relevant, specific customer proof. User evidence is helping the teams at Gong, Ramp, Splunk, and many more avoid this fate. User evidence is the customer evidence platform for go-to-market teams that makes it easy to collect customer feedback throughout the customer lifecycle, curate the best proof points, and share it with your go-to-market team to use. When asked about how Gong uses user evidence, Udi Ledegor, chief evangelist at Gong, who is also part of the GTM Fund community network, said, user evidence helps Gong showcase the value our platform provides by generating high-quality customer proof. With the ability to scale content creation, we can dedicate more time to enabling our sellers and building relationships with advocates. Trust is everything, and your customers are the best source of trusted feedback. Highly recommend you check out User Evidence, the customer evidence platform. You could do so at userevidence.com/GTM now. That's userevidence, all one word, .com/GTM and OW. Now, on to the episode.
In this episode, you'll learn how to build repeatable growth in complex markets, straight from someone who's done it multiple times. Erica Anderman is the co-founder and COO of Foodini and previously led revenue at food tech companies Odeko and Slice. Over her 15-year career, she's built revenue organizations, sales, customer success, ops, and helped scale multiple vertical SaaS companies to thousands of customers. We cover a lot. Erica, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I've been wanting to have you on actually since we first connected, and just hearing you go through your founder journey, your operating experience in San Diego. So glad we're taking the time to connect now.
Yeah, absolutely. San Diego's a great time. I'm sad I missed the New York one, though. Excited for the next one.
I know. We got some beautiful sunshine here this summer, though, so we'll take it.
Yeah.
And we will jump into your founder journey, but first I want to start with your operating experience because you had a bit of a non-traditional path to CRO. You came up, yes, through sales, but also through operations, customer success, and partnerships. Maybe walk us through those early days. What did they look like?
Yeah, sure. I got my start in sales in terms of, starting outside sales, door-to-door, restaurant, small business sales. But really quickly after, a lot of it, first experience was single platform for the most part. I did an internship before that, but at single platform, we were inside sales and outside sales. But basically, we figured out inside we could scale much faster. And in the beginning, there was about 10 of us. We took a personality test of understanding the team as part of, one of those get to know each other early days. And I think the results were every single person on the team, except for the one woman we actually had in finance, was a persuader. And I was the only one that was a persuader stabilizer. And starting to realize we had no account management. We were all sales. And for me, it was just kind of being intuitive of understanding a bit. I actually cared and was super curious about what the experience was post-sales. While I'm motivated by hitting numbers like any salesperson, I also really was drawn to but we need to fix and understand how this connects to this and how the product actually gets the feedback from the customer team and kind of building out the post-sale side of things. So I was always drawn to that. And then over time, a lot of it was just continuing to kind of put my hand up as we had new teams and kind of new areas to focus on. That's one benefit of picking the right startup that's growing really quickly is you're constantly seeing new teams and new initiatives get developed. And as long as you continue to do a really good job at the job you're doing, usually they tap you for that. So a lot of it for me was just kind of saying yes, taking on those new teams, and getting the confidence, I'd say, to lead the full revenue org. I think in the beginning for me, it was feeling as though I needed to have experience in every single area. And slowly but surely, by having a little bit of experience in sales, account management, a little bit more, on the RevOps side, and then marketing, I started to understand, you know what? I actually am more effective by being able to solve problems across the full customer journey and really kind of see things come together than I am at becoming a super expert at one special area. And a lot of it was also finding leaders who believed in me. That was a big portion for me in the early days where I had, two CEOs who ended up giving me the job of leading the revenue org before I asked for it, when I was leading post sales. And a lot of that finally made me realize, you know what? You're right. I can do this thing. Which, confidence is always something I think we're all working on.
Definitely. Forcible confidence, just being handed the revenue organization. I love it. And what kind of early career beliefs and leadership beliefs did you hold that allowed you to just keep advancing in organizations and have the confidence to keep going?
I think a lot of it is always learning. I think there's this limiting belief, I think especially women have, of you need to have experience in every area before you do it. And I think that's something I hear a lot, especially from younger women earlier on in their careers, is this, but I shouldn't do it, or I don't have this specific experience for this job.
I'm not
And it
qualified.
Exactly. And now having managed hundreds of women and men and having them all approach me it's insane to me how many more men think that they are qualified and they don't care. They are open to I can do this and they have that confidence. And so I always try to tell women it's like it's just a limiting belief. It's internal. Like ultimately everyone is still figuring it out no matter what role you're at or how much experience you have, especially in today's days with AI changing so much so quickly. I think the most important thing is to stop questioning yourself and put yourself in an area of which you're afraid that you might not know everything because that's where you learn and also where you have the best experiences.
Well said. And that is the cool thing about AI. It's almost level setting the playing field where, regardless of what role you're in, seniority you hold, everybody is suddenly learning something new. And it's something that if you are not adopting it, you are being left behind. And so it's really resetting the playing field.
1,000%. I mean, I spend time with our 22-year-old, recent college grad who is just in love with the AI tools. I learn more from him than I do from mentors who have been, CROs and different kinds of learnings, right? There's obviously a benefit to years of learning, especially from a management perspective, but from a go-to-market, tools perspective, I'd say we're in a new era where there's a lot of almost too many new tools and things to use that I think keeping your eyes open and really being open-minded to trying new things and new tactics is the right way to go.
Hmm. And you're at an interesting inflection point of building because you're in the early stages of Foodini's journey. And so you can almost take AI and really build AI native. Whereas, startups that are further along, it is a bit of a process to actually kind of bring it into your foundation instead of bolting it on.
1,000%. It's been very humbling to go from, managing huge teams, having, VPs managing specific functions, sales underneath me to now going to a team of one. And it's been years. At first I was like, wow, I haven't been the one out selling, myself in many years. But it's fun and I actually think it's good for me. It's like getting back in the seat and now, like I said, a new time. And so it's very different now to figure out, okay, how do I replicate myself? And maybe that's through video, sending sales of myself to using tools to send that to a lot more people than hiring the way that, I was brought up in my early days managing sales teams. It was a quota per rep. That's how you built your models. You obviously factored in a bit for attrition or people not hitting their quotas, but ultimately that's the way you kind of built this build up method. And now I think it's just completely different. And so I think those that are kind of using the tools and being more open-minded towards leveraging AI are going to be the more successful revenue leaders.
And take us through that transition from CRO to founder. And then there's a lot of areas I want to dive into that you just touched on. But what did that transition look like going from operator to suddenly being in the founder seat?
Yeah. Well, besides again the humbling experience of having no resources, and, figuring a lot more out. I don't want to say it's that different, especially when you join really early stage startups like I have, where, I was around in the first 10, both single platform and Slice. So we didn't have a ton of resources there either. So you are figuring things out. But as a founder, you really have to they focus on areas you just never have before, right? Like I've always had a technical person. Obviously, we now have gotten one, but in the very early days, you're really needing to lean into areas that you don't have expertise. And so I think where I've kind of leaned back as what I've always found to be the most important thing at the startups I've been at, which is kind of that really clear mission and understanding what you're there to do. Because that is, I think, the framework and the foundation that you need to then build and scale teams as you grow. But it's been a lot of just kind of relearning, I guess, and kind of forgetting a lot of what I've learned when you've had bigger teams and you're focused more on management issues and scaling, and a lot more on kind of what are the ways that I can scale myself and learn. I think fundraising is also something as a revenue leader. It's sales. It's a different type of sales, but ultimately you're identifying your ICP and right investor for you. You're telling your story. It's there's similar ways, and I do think as a revenue leader previously, it helped me to kind of figure out how to set up the go-to-market motion, obviously, for a company early on.
That's a really good point. I love the analogy of using fundraising as a sales organization or vice versa. So, if you were to run it that way, what kind of tactical advice would you break down for other founders?
Ultimately, it's a lot of it is identifying, looking at market conditions, right? So even in fundraising, there's market conditions today. AI, every company that has AI in its name is getting a ridiculous valuation compared to traditional SaaS, and that happens super quick. And there's obviously a factor of you need to truly actually use AI. I think there's also a bit, especially in the early days of these kind of companies that are like AI enabled, and exactly how are you using it? But from a tactical standpoint, I think there's understanding what the market looks like today, and understanding how to sell yourself as a founder, right? I think one area for me that has been a challenge, as I said, is the confidence, right? And really, I've always felt this limiting belief of like, well, I need to learn more, have more experience, and I think when you start as a founder, you realize so many founders had so much more confidence so much earlier on, like straight, out of school before they had any experience. They just had a lot of conviction. And so I think coming out of go to market and then starting as a founder, a lot of what I've used is that understanding how to build that mission that I can then build the team around, and then building that story that becomes my pitch. And the pitch of what I'm building is similar to the pitch of what product I'm selling. Ultimately, I'm now just selling to an investor to get them to buy into my vision to kind of join me for this. But it's just, a different type of sale, bigger stakes, bigger money. And ultimately, obviously, there's a lot of difference later on as you scale. But I think there's a lot of learnings that you can bring with you to the founder seat.
Mhm. Mhm. I hear you. Yeah. And I find that when we're receiving pitches, for example, it is the difference is you're almost the product also, right? So, yes, you're pitching the product, but you're very much the product at an early stage, the founder itself. So you're seeing like, is this the right person for building this product? And obviously the market conditions and why, but suddenly you're personally rolled up under the product too, which is an interesting thing to consider, but I feel like has similarities to being a sales leader or revenue leader in general, because you're recruiting. You're recruiting people to buy into your mission. So maybe there's a lot more commonalities there than meets the eye.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what gives me confidence in what I'm building today is that I've spent 15 years in this industry and I have learned a ton, right? My first company was one of the first companies to build menus on the internet. So I know that that schema of menus is still being used. And today, what I'm building is a better way to actually get transparency into ingredients because I know that those menu schemas that are used across all online ordering companies don't have the ability to add ingredients, which is a unique insight that I have because I've been in this industry for a long time. And so while that doesn't mean I have it all figured out, like in all honesty, the go to market, which we can get into, was not what I thought it would be when I started. The business has pivoted and we've learned a lot as we've gone. But ultimately, my knowledge of the industry and my experience in the industry, my relationships that I've created over over a decade of just doing my job, building partnerships at different companies. But those relationships, a lot of people move within the same industry, and ultimately you build upon that, as you continue to grow in your career.
Definitely. It compounds relationships, and it truly is a small world in SaaS.
Exactly. And it matters. That's what I think is the positive too, is when you care about the relationships you built. I think that it matters, whether it's people who have worked for me who are asking for, me to talk to their hiring managers for referrals, or people who I've worked for, my CEOs that I've previously worked for. I am really proud of the fact that I can call all of them and they want to help me and back me. And I think that's something everyone should just hold true to themselves at, no matter what role you're in or no matter what company you're in, is doing the job, building the right relationships and around you is going to pay off no matter what you decide to do in the future.
So well said. When we think about it too, around referencing and overall hiring internally, but also referencing on the investment side, is if you're doing the work, nobody should have something bad to say about you in a way. People should enjoy working with you. Typically, references are all 100%, because if you're doing the work and doing it well, people will say just tremendous things.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, I think it means a lot.
give us, listeners especially, give us a little bit of context to Foodini, and I would love to jump into your go-to-market. Because I know I'm a big fan, I'm already familiar, but for everyone else.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So yeah, Foodini was born out of really actually met the company through go to market fund. I at the time was full time leading revenue at Odeko. I had joined go to market the fund, and I was at one of the earlier dinners that we had here in LA. Sat next to a fellow LP who we were talking about our backgrounds, and I told him a lot about my experience in food tech, and he said, he's like, I met a guy who started a company. He's trying to solve for people who have allergies or dietary needs. He's celiac, and he started the company in Sydney, Australia. Guy sitting next to me was Irish guy who also lived here in LA. But again, small world, and you never know. His friend was coming to LA next week, and he asked me if I would mind getting coffee with him and helping him out because he was, new to the restaurant tech world. So I was like, sure. I personally can eat most things. I'm pretty lucky. But growing up, my brother had an autoimmune disease that prevented him from eating certain foods. He was doing the elimination diets. My niece and nephew have allergies. My best friend had 2 kids riddled with allergies. And for me, it was one of those, it doesn't impact you, but you see it, right? Every time you sit down at a restaurant now, they ask you, do you have any allergies or dietary needs? And so I was curious about what he was building, met him, and at the time he was building a consumer app for people like him. So he was sick and tired of not knowing where he could go to get a sandwich. Um, and the big aha for me was it was incredible the growth that he was seeing. Consumers loved the product. Over 100,000 users in less than a year, all signing on to help them figure out where they can go and what they could eat. The challenge was, how do you get the data? And that's what he was talking to me about being in restaurant tech. Is he was like, I'm reaching out to each and every restaurant, trying to get the information about exactly what they're using in their food, when trying to make sure that we obviously can tell consumers exactly what they can and cannot have. And the challenge was getting that data. And that was the big aha for me, was this system is just not set up today in terms of where recipe information, where products and ingredients that are used within our food are currently in back of house systems, if they exist. For like the fine dining farm to table restaurant, typically they aren't even documented. But for most chains, they're documented, but they're not actually integrated within the ordering experience. Consumer ordering, whether that's in the restaurant, online, it doesn't actually have any of that ingredient information. Thus, we're manually asking every time we go out to eat what we can and cannot have, which is, of course, prone to error, mistake. Every 10 seconds, someone's going to the ER because of a food allergy related incident. And so add in the kind of growing food as medicine movement, a ton of people paying attention now to longevity and their biometric markers and understanding their nutritional needs. There's just a kind of increasing consumer demand at this point to know what's in our food when we dine out. And so that's what we're really building, is working within the hospitality industry, not just restaurants, but you can imagine stadiums, amusement parks, aged care, anywhere food is served. There's a need to know what exactly is in that food. And so we're helping to create that transparency, leveraging AI to kind of fill in the gaps, using a dietitian team to verify the information so that we're able to create personalized menus for diners custom to whatever their allergy or dietary need is.
Incredible. And I think I read actually just the other day that 1 in 3 Americans now has some kind of food restriction, allergy, intolerance. So market's certainly there in terms of volume.
Exactly. But the learning, again, learnings right here for the listeners. It was hard to figure out. So we thought, beginning consumer is the most in need here. But the challenge is your product has to be able to deliver for those consumers. And we learned after quickly looking into the industry that even though consumers want this, you can't give them the data they need. Especially it's a health related issue, right? It's a food allergy. Some people, prefer to avoid dairy for whatever reason. But for the people where it's an actual need, that's not something you can just guess at. So I always say also, because people are like, oh, you use AI. We use AI in certain aspects really to help us to agentic AI perform a job. If we don't have the information available right away, we will go search a database. We're building a products database of exactly what restaurants are buying and what those ingredients are within those products. We're doing the work. You can't take a picture. There's a lot of cool AI interfaces these days of take a picture of your food and we'll tell you exactly what's in there. You can get pretty good, right? And the better the tech gets, we can have an idea. But for people who have food allergies or true needs, we actually need to do a better job at documenting the information. So it took a lot of work and understanding what we actually needed to do the job here and to get this accurate information and figuring out the go-to-market as we went.
Yeah. And at what point did you actually join Foodini? Was it still a consumer app or had you transitioned to be more of the data layer?
Yeah. So I joined about a year and a half ago when it was a consumer app. And so part of my time now joining as co-founder, at the time it was still in Australia, just a consumer app. So my co-founder moved to LA here with me, and we started the business and really pivoted to be the data application layer, obviously using a lot of my knowledge about the industry. And the big kind of aha for us was really understanding the need across online ordering. And that's been a big focus for us, is building this data application layer, which has been, about a year and a half that we've been working on it now.
Incredible. And when you're thinking about the data that you're gathering and how you're interviewing or shaping the initial go-to-market plan, what did that early day look like? Obviously, you had the transition from consumer forward, but I'm curious what that progression looked like for anyone else who's thinking about their go-to-market, who's pivoting, who's really trying to dig in and trying to find that product market fit initially.
Yeah, of course. I'm not gonna. I will just say it's hard. Like it was because there's a lot of factors, especially with two-sided. I call this a marketplace, but I have experience. A lot of my previous experiences were in marketplaces. Slice. We worked with local pizzerias, and we had consumers ordering those pizzerias. We had the similar battle of were we a consumer app? Were we a place for people to come order pizza? Or were we software, vertical SaaS for these pizzerias where we were powering their online ordering? And there was battles over the years, over time of trying to kind of figure out the go-to-market, even at a company that had product market fit, right? There's a lot of learnings always as you go. But the big learning for me at Slice was by focusing on that one vertical and really learning and understanding the challenge we were solving, we needed to build a better experience to order. And that meant the restaurants, the pizzeria partners were who we were selling to, but consumers benefited. And it was B2B to C was the real unlock from a growth perspective, because we powered the online ordering where we would acquire the consumer. The consumer would have said, I just ordered within 2 seconds rather than having to call and be put on hold while I'm, driving home on a Friday from picking my kids up from soccer practice. Now I can click reorder every week on this amazing app. And we saw by looking at the data that on average, people were looking at, 1 to 2 of their favorite pizzerias every single week. They weren't necessarily using us as a discovery app. And that really allowed us to own in on we should be a tool for people to order from their favorite pizzeria. It's about providing loyalty, and it's about really leaning into an easier and better way instead of trying to be this discovery engine. And that was Slice. But to bring it to Foodini, similar for me in terms of understanding the problem we were solving. And here, blatantly obvious, consumers love this, right? The emails we get. Like when they showed me when I first joined at some of the consumer people being like, this is a savior. We're scared to go out to eat right now. This has been plaguing us. I'd never bring my kids out to eat because I don't trust what I ask the waiter or waitress. I can see in their eyes that they don't actually know. And who's to blame them? They probably started the job a week ago. You expect them to be an expert at every ingredient. And so it really was about learning and understanding where the problems were. And for us at Foodini, it was actually understanding when we talked to restaurants, this wasn't something that they could just give us. We had, heads of the head of dietetics and nutrition at one of the biggest food service companies walked us through where she specifically was having challenges working with getting this data from manufacturers and distributors so that she could be accurate in giving it to us. And that's where we really learned here, okay, this is probably going to take us a little longer than we wanted, right? There's a lot of kind of data infrastructure that needs to be set up. But that was also where we saw this opportunity, which was this doesn't exist today. So there's no way that if you're ordering on DoorDash or if you're going in person, they could just tell you, hey, here's the data. We actually have to create it. And there's an opportunity here by being one of the first to really help to document that information. Listening to the market, I'd say, is another one. Like right now, for us, there's, as I said, the growing food is medicine movement. There's this focus on understanding what's in your food. The MAHA movement is big about ingredient transparency, which is good for us. There's some legislation that just passed here in California that actually requires labeling. And so as a go-to-market leader, where my head goes is like, interesting. So if this now goes through and it becomes compliant software, that's a very different go-to-market motion than trying to prove, this is something that's going to help drive new business or help drive repeat business. Now it's something that is actually going to be required and is a better solution than labeling every single ingredient on a menu. So there's a lot of constantly kind of listening to those signals and adjusting as we go to figure out the right motion.
Incredible. That's fantastic. I think there's tons of learnings that others can really absorb from your story, Erica. So thank you for sharing.
Of course.
And you mentioned you brought in a dietitian specifically for more of the data side, but I've also heard that, you partnered with allergy education groups, and we supported donation efforts and other community initiatives. And that's a constant theme that we see and hear across vertical companies is the importance of community. I'm curious your perspective on community as a vertical company.
Oh, I would just double down a million times over of how often this has been a theme, across, again, every company I've been at, not just Foodini. Few examples over the years, Slice, it was local pizzerias. Nothing brought me more joy than when we had your customer advisory board. I recommend them to every company. But when they're pizzeria owners, it's a good time. These guys are not the most tech savvy, but we ate well every time. They would all bring in. Yeah, it was great. But also just listening and learning, and there's no better way to also motivate the team internally. So that was one thing I've always brought as a revenue leader, because revenue leader is the title. I like to say it's customer leader, right? It's the voice of the customer, because that's ultimately what drives the revenue, is if you understand intimately who you're selling to. And I believe that comes through truly listening, bringing them forward, actually bringing their challenges, what they're liking, kind of setting that format up. I remember, especially when we were in the office back in New York with Slice, I remember bringing them in, and engineers and people who weren't necessarily customer facing would love to come in and listen to the direct from the customer feedback, which is just always such a helpful way to really learn and understand, and kind of creating that community, because they want to feel heard. And when you create a platform for these pizzerias, we created a conference, I remember, probably like 5 or so years in, where we brought together a bunch of local pizzerias. We brought some of the leaders in the space who were really good at marketing, like Tony Baloney's in New Jersey, who was great at it. We brought in a social media guy who had started a podcast about, pizza, one of the best guys who made some of the best dough, and he was like a pioneer in the Detroit style. This was fun, right? But we brought it together, and they loved the content. They came because they were learning from each other. And the fact that we just facilitated a place for them to be able to meet, learn. Sometimes they did business deals together, but ultimately it just continued to really crystallize that trust in us as a tech partner. That not only allowed us to obviously retain them, but grow. Because the other thing that you benefit from when you focus on one vertical and building a community within that vertical is you build that trust, which enables you to continue to expand beyond what you're currently offering. So from a revenue perspective, we started with online ordering. We later added on things like supplies. The mission was to unite these local pizzerias, and help them compete against big chains. We helped them do that in multiple ways. It didn't have to just be through the original product. There were additional ways as we grew and had scale, where once we had, 12,000 local pizzerias, we realized they're paying 36 cents for every single box, while Domino's is paying 6 cents. We should be able to help negotiate. And those weren't, easy things in the beginning. There's a lot of learning new industries. I had never gotten into supplies before that. I'm out here negotiating the price of pizza boxes. Not something I had thought I would be doing in my career, but it was actually super fun to just learn new ways and launch these new products, launch these new ways. Odeko, similar with coffee shops, right? These coffee shops loved to learn from each other. We would do things like these cupping throwdowns. I didn't know what that was before I was in the coffee industry, but these baristas will do these latte art, where they compete on the perfect latte art and what milk foams the best of all the alternative milks, and they learn from each other, and it just added more of a reason for them to continue to use Odeko and to partner with us as their supplies provider. It's one of the most important things, from really learning who your customers are, helping them to meet and talk to each other. For us currently, one of the biggest levers we have is really leaning into others in the space who are also advocating for change. So my co-founder, he's on the board for FAIR, which is the Food Allergies Research and Education Group, our national advocacy group, who they're doing a ton of work with, some of the big names like the Mahomes family, for example, on the Kansas City Chiefs. They have 2 kids with food allergies. They are super dedicated. They've built out this incredible stadium in Kansas City that has a ton of options for people who are gluten-free, and they help to figure out where you can go to get certain food, and that is, pioneering for the industry. So there's so much learning from each other when you really all lean into kind of who else is building in your space, shares a similar mission, and refer each other, help each other out. One of the first people I met, this woman, Betsy, who runs Menu Trinfo, they do a ton of training for allergies. And she herself has, lived through a chronic condition where she changed her way of eating. And she's such a good advocate for the industry. And now she's working for the government. She's working with MAHA, helping to initiate real change in terms of creating more transparency. And so I think the more you lean into others who are also building in your space, the more you'll kind of leverage that community, and people love to help each other out.
Absolutely. And one of the cool things, I mean, many cool things, I think I extracted from what you just shared there is it's not necessarily about lookalikes. It's actually about alignment and vision. People can look and feel very different. They might not be your customers, they might be partners, but they're on the same mission, and pulling those people together is what's valuable.
Absolutely.
Now,
Yeah.
Erica, what do you think about infrastructure for pulling people together? You've done it in multiple ways. You've done these cupping events. You've done, it with pizza delivery and overall the pizza space. A lot of companies want to build community but don't know how. And so their immediate default is, I'm going to just put everyone into a Slack channel or a WhatsApp group. How do you feel about the infrastructure of community? Do you think that it's becoming more saturated and we need to keep getting more creative? Or are simple group chats helpful?
I think it depends who your community is and their sophistication level. So as someone who kind of grew up in SMB, small business, you're not putting those guys in a Slack channel. Guys and girls, but a lot of, especially pizza. It's so it needed different thinking. So there, we would bring them into the office. We would bring in a lunch. We would create this conference of which we would bring them together, send out the content. I think creating valuable content for the community, that's a theme that can go. And then how that content is communicated depends on who they are and where they spend their time. So sometimes it makes sense to bring them together. I think in person is always better than a Slack channel or a WhatsApp group, but it's difficult. So you can only do that, let's say, a few times a year, and it costs money, but it is worth it if you can create that valuable content that not only enforces your brand and the value you create, but it also helps to bring that community together. I think the trust that you create from those type of real in-person events is invaluable. But as far as the kind of WhatsApp groups or the other ways to connect, keeping it a bit smaller, I think, is important, and also creating some sort of a framework or ability to create a bit of structure. Because no one wants to just be in a group. It's always a bit intimidating of like who's going to kind of speak first, or should I answer that question, or do I not have as much expertise? Everyone kind of has those fears when it comes to just contributing. Not everyone, but you've got your few loud people in the room. But I always think kind of creating a bit of structure, creating some smaller breakout of groups that are, examples would be with Slice, we would have like specifically pizzeria owners that had multiple locations in Brooklyn. So it was like more specific. They were going through the same types of challenges and could speak more to each other. I think those type of kind of smaller micro communities, call it. Other examples, I mean, I think go to market, right? You guys, we do a good job of, I've met so many people through go to market. They're not all food tech. We do have our little community within go to market of, JG and Brandon, who when I go to these things, I always see them, our little group that are also in food tech and go to market.
Yeah.
But there's also, for me, I think it's so beneficial to meet like women in leadership and sales, which there's obviously more than there used to be, but we're still a minority. And being able to create that little micro community that I can tap into when I'm specifically dealing with challenges that might be specific to things that other women can relate to. I think those kind of smaller communities where people can feel a bit more open in sharing, I think are even more valuable than just the larger formats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great advice. Because I mean, you don't get the value if you're not actually participating. So creating that relevance creates the value. Love it. Brilliant. And you talk a lot about, I mean, the data that you built out, the programs that you built out at Foodini. I'm curious about your funnel, if you don't mind me asking. Just overall, how do you think about measurements and how has that evolved over time?
Yeah. So in general, I'd say funnel, I guess we're to break it down, kind of where awareness. And I break this into like pre-product market fit as well as post, where I think it's two different things in terms of how much you pour into it. I think lead gen, building up that funnel. If it's product market fit, a lot of it is partnerships. It's understanding how to kind of get the word out about what you're building, especially if similar to what we're doing at Foodini, you're a new category. You're a new product that has never been done. There's a lot that's needed in terms of getting people to understand the problem and to be able to kind of build the thought sharing side of things. So I'd say a lot of it is being a thought leader, helping to educate others in this space, um, leaning into companies or partners that have a lot more distribution than you in the early days to be able to distribute that type of content and sharing. I always caution early revenue leaders on things like lead gen, spending a lot of money on marketing. I think that marketing makes sense post product market fit when you know you've got a measurable outcome. But I caution on spending too much money on things like ads really early on for early stage startups when you don't yet know exactly who your ICP is and how to reach out to them. But I'd say that kind of first part would be the awareness funnel, which right now for us is a lot of kind of that thought leadership and the partnerships we're building within the industry. Um, Next portion I'd say would be consideration, buying side. In SMB, that was sales. So small business sales is really not product led, as much as things might change over time. But for SMBs, especially restaurant owners, you have to reach out. So a lot of it for us with sales is traditional outbound sales. We alternate some in person, some inside sales, but for the most part, it was the basic sales metrics of still old school meetings held, win ratios, looking at sales cycles, but understanding kind of the sales funnel. Um, Growth and retention, where I started my career and I still kind of feel the most passionate of where I think the most value sometimes can be found is really in terms of understanding that customer journey. What are the indicators of where customers are getting the most value? The leading indicators is one thing I always try to pay attention to, not just looking at churn, which is a lagging indicator, but really understanding the customer throughout their journey with you. And I think a lot of it is just building out that infrastructure as you go in terms of understanding how to look at the journey, where to measure across the way. And that's where, RevOps has been something that, especially now with AI tools, I think it's becoming easier, which is great. Back in the day, nothing was more important to me than my partner, my head of RevOps, who came with me to multiple companies because I depended on her so much because she was a thought partner to me, and I understood that I was a better revenue leader if I had her next to me helping me to really break down each stage of the funnel and figure out, what needed my attention and where to pay attention to. But I think ultimately it all comes down to kind of looking at it as an overall customer journey and breaking it down into those specific funnels.
Absolutely. So many nuggets of helpful tactical information there. Thank you, Erica. And you mentioned distribution through partners and so forth. And content is a big part of distribution in terms of what can be helpful to provide to partners. And you've taken a lot of messy data sets, which now have turned into extreme value for companies creating unique content. It's proprietary data. What kind of frameworks, if any, have you found helpful for taking these crazy raw data sets and actually turning them into valuable content that partners or other want to use and trust and share?
A lot of honestly, especially with what we're doing now, this is messy. So as you said, like taking a lot of information that's offline, or it's not properly documented. It came down to finding kind of where those gaps were. And so, as I mentioned previously, it was like really speaking directly with each of the kind of the ICPs, the target customers that we're working with, understanding where those gaps were and taking the right approach to make sure that we weren't taking any shortcuts. So the benefit is like, I don't think you could have done this, call it 5 years ago, because there have been a lot of advancements in AI and a lot of advancements in where we're tracking product information, because we're not the only ones who are focused on creating more transparency. I've met with founders of other companies in this space. For example, this company Starfish that's more focused on food traceability. So, very different use case. For them, it's trying to figure out, okay, when we have a breakout of salmonella or E. coli, how do I know exactly where that came from? But the work that they're doing is to help create this system of tracking within the food system that creates these single identifiers for specific products and ingredients, which then benefits us, because if we have that unified system, we all benefit. For us, it's about creating transparency into exactly what ingredients are within those products and building the right infrastructure such that if the manufacturer changed the recipe, that I, because I have that product stored in my database, automatically change that recipe that then changes the information to the consumer, instead of having to then have the restaurant be aware that the manufacturer made that change and then have to update me and my system. So a lot of it is through this kind of broken system for so long. We've really thought through what is required to create the right infrastructure for this data to be able to make sure that we have the right changes when they're made. And I'm not saying it's perfect yet, but that's been a lot of our approach is, how do we make sure we get this right? And how do we really build in a way that's for scale? Because a lot of the way the industry has tried to solve for this is through short-term, in my opinion, thinking, through things like tagging. And I get why, right? Okay, well, we see there's all these people who are gluten-free. We see there's all these people asking these questions, or there's people who are allergic to soy. We should require them to label the top 9. And a lot of, whether it be enforced legally, state by state, or just restaurants wanting to help answer questions, they've started to add things like GF on the menu, or C, or and these short-term things which cause confusion, because some places have contains gluten, which means this item contains gluten. Others have gluten-free. And this has become eye-opening to me going out to eat every day with my co-founder, where going to even big chains that are best in breed, like a Kava, we were standing in line. They couldn't tell us if the falafel had gluten. It wasn't on the menu. It wasn't they had to ask like 5 people while there was a whole line behind us. And so really for us, it's about, my belief is that ingredients are what needs to be documented. Doesn't, again, need to be written out, but we have it in the back end where we tag every one of those ingredients. We know what is in that food, and we just show the customer what they need to know. But ultimately, that means that whether you have one of the top 9 allergens, or if you're just someone who has gut health issues and you're on a low FODMAP diet, or you're someone who has a sensitivity to ginger, it doesn't matter what it is. If you break it down to the ingredient level, that's a long-term solution versus short-term tagging. So a lot of it is just really kind of trying to think through what's the right way to solve the problem, not just today, but as that, continues to grow and scale.
Hmm. What does the future of dining look like in that world? Let's say Foodini's implemented at a restaurant I'm walking in, or anyone listening is walking in and dining at the restaurant. What does the experience look like?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start from before they even get to the restaurant, which is because there's a lot of conversation. Yeah. I always am fascinated, right? Especially if you look and you pay attention to where funding goes. If you pay attention, a lot of companies or two specifically, founders who get a lot of attention, Mark Laurie at Wonder, Travis Kalanick at Cloud Kitchens, both have, raised billions of dollars. In food companies, if you look at what they're building, you might question, looks like cloud kitchens. Both there's a ton of money going into they're building these kitchens. But if you actually listen to their larger visions, was interesting. Both talk about this kind of future of health, which is where, as not just consumers, but we in general, I think, are all curious more and paying more attention to our health. And so a lot of the belief is that in the future, we are going to understand our personal microbiomes a lot more than we ever have previously, where instead of just saying, I have this illness and I need to take this prescription medication, a lot of people are more interested in understanding their genetics. There's a lot of also money going into genetic testing. There's a lot of money, companies like Function Health that are blowing up, which is all about just testing more about your health indicators than previously paid attention to. So I think a lot of people are going to understand themselves more, their predispositions, and their nutritional needs. And what that means, I think if you look at what, Wonder and Cloud Kitchens want, that means that they also are going to capitalize on the efficiencies of automation, where within these cloud kitchens, you're going to be able to automate all of this food being made. You know exactly what ingredients are in there because you're making it all within these cloud kitchens. And so people are going to get their blood tested at home, and based on those results, they're going to be able to get these tailored AI-generated meal plans that help make sure that they get the right nutrition for whatever they're currently going through, whether they're running a marathon or recovering from an illness, and that those meals are going to be tailored to them. I do think that future will exist. What I want to hope at Foodini is that what we're going to help prevent is that people aren't going to just sit at home and order from food made by robots. I think there's still an appetite for people for in-person dining, for hospitality, for people to want to go out to eat, to want to order from their favorite restaurants that are made from a local ethnic restaurant nearby that opens it up because they opened up a restaurant out of their heart and because they want to cook from their Nona's recipes, and for me, what I'm hoping we're going to build is the infrastructure required to help those restaurants to just properly document what is in that food so that the consumer can place that order, whether it be through DoorDash, Uber Eats, or whatever the online ordering, direct from the restaurant online, or whether they go in person. Right now, we have a QR code that goes on the menu. That way, when you're sitting there, whether it's online, you click a link, in venue, you glue the QR code, you enter whatever it is your dietary need or profile is. So anything from I'm allergic to nuts to, again, I'm avoiding cilantro. You save, and then instantly, here's what you can have. Here's what you can modify, and we use exactly what the current modifiers are, and here's what you can't have and why specifically. So you have that information up front, whether it be before you place the order or when you're there. You can then make an informed decision. You don't have to be the awkward person at the table. You don't have to not go out to eat because you don't have the information you need. And you can make an informed decision that, is necessary for a lot of people for their health.
Well, that just got me incredibly excited about the future and far more comprehensive than I anticipated. Even, the tailored dietary understandings at more of the overarching level, and then how solutions like Foodini actually fit into that and enable actually small businesses even to participate in that is super cool. I actually just got micronutrient testing because that was the concept I was going for, is how do I actually tailor it? But I can't layer on things like training for a marathon on top of that and things like that. At least I haven't yet. Maybe you can. But there's a lot of things that I can only imagine if we're able to facilitate that at a greater scale.
Exactly. Obviously, I get quite passionate about it. But it's I think it's fun, right? And that's another thing I'd give as just general advice to anyone. Is whether whatever it is you're doing, pick an industry that you actually enjoy, right? I wouldn't necessarily say most people would recommend you get into food tech. The margins are pretty awful in restaurants, and it's not necessarily a huge ACV industry, but I personally I love hospitality. I love food. And I'm genuinely interested in the future of health. And so for me, it makes every day easier. And I think everyone is different, but if you can build in an industry that you love, it definitely makes, each day a little bit more fun.
Great advice. And zooming out to the overall vertical space, including food tech, but even beyond that, in food tech, we saw Toast, we saw Olo, they both IPO'd in 2021. More recently, overall in vertical, we've seen companies like ServiceTitan, Rubrik, CoreWeave, and others IPO. how are you seeing the trends from the vertical space overall in comparison to any horizontal products?
Yeah. I think a lot of it goes back to what we kind of talked about on the community side of things is it's if you focus on one vertical, you it's easier to become an expert, right? There's so many things that are easier. I know Jordan Crawford, another member of the go-to-market community, listen to a lot of what he talks about using AI tools to target your ICP. He always talks, if you know your ICP, it is so much easier. And so if you focus on one vertical from just the beginning, early days of the funnel, of targeting that to learning and understanding their needs, their problems, their challenges, it's just, I think, easier. Obviously, it's more limited in terms of a smaller, typically depending again on the vertical, but you can go so much deeper and I think you can really understand what problems you're solving. And you can understand, especially the more you're within a specific vertical, the pitfalls earlier on because you have those learnings and you can learn how to build faster. For me, it's proven helpful in my career when I talk, I advise a lot of early stage companies coming into the industry and you help them to learn faster because it's like, a lot of people, especially selling to restaurants, I always laugh when they have like a PLG motion and I'm like, like it's you still gotta, reach out to these guys. And so I think there's just a lot of benefit when you focus on one vertical to just be able to become an expert in that, to really learn from it. And I think it just also helps to just your career, I think, to really kind of specialize in an area. And it could be obviously you can specialize in a function. You can be a sales expert at multiple verticals, but I find at least focusing on one allows you to have a bit more of an expertise that you can pass on to others and to really go broader within that one vertical as you go because you've learned so much about it.
Yeah, you can go multi-product and have that community thread. Well, Erica, last question. What's one tactic or strategy that's working for you right now at Foodini? And maybe we haven't talked about so far.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned before, going to the early days, it's playing around with a lot of tools. There's a lot out there, especially right now with all the different AI tools and go to market. And so we have been kind of taking this approach of how do we think through how we can use a tool instead of necessarily the traditional way of doing things. So a few examples would be we're doing a new B2B marketing video. We're doing a lot of partnering with these online ordering companies and helping them understand how we're able to capture all of this data from their restaurant partners. And instead of where previously I probably would be like, all right, we need to create a video. I need to reach out to a video company to help me create this. We're building it ourselves. And it's shocking to me how far we've gotten with just using some of the tools that are available, even the free versions. Just some very real examples. There's a company called Jitter that has templates that you can create to create videos, this art grid and Higgs fields, which have image generation and video generation that you can create. 11 labs for AI voiceover, where you can select all these different voices. You can adjust the speed. You can address how they enunciate certain words. Like I've been really blown away by some of the tools available to us. So I would just encourage everybody just start playing around. Even from a product perspective, early founders, I would suggest, yours Lovable. We're using this tool called Vercel to build out this self-onboarding flow right now. And this isn't just the old days I partnered with design, and product to be able to build things out, but you actually can build out web flows that you can, ship out next day. And so I think we're in a new day today where you can build much easier. So I just encourage everyone to just start playing around.
Excellent advice. And I can't wait to see that video when it goes live.
I'll follow you.
Perfect. Erica, this has been incredibly helpful. Where can people follow you or find you? What's the best way to get in touch or just follow your journey?
Yeah, Erica Anderman on LinkedIn. I'd say I probably should post more, but you can find me there. Email personal email, eanderman@gmail.com. I'm definitely always happy to talk to anyone, but I especially love talking to women early on in their careers. So anyone welcome to reach out. Yeah.
Incredible. Super generous of you. And thank you for also sharing these insights more broadly here with our audience. Really appreciate it. It's been incredibly helpful. And to our listeners, thank you for hanging with us.
Of course. This was fun. Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you, Erica.